Okay, I think we'll begin. I know we'll still continue to have a few folks joining us. Welcome everyone to our session, Helping Your Hawk Soar, one of our orientation sessions specifically for families and supporters of our incoming students. My name is Lori Prince. I serve as the Director of Parent and Family Engagement at Seattle U. So my office is here actually for you, to help you as you help your student navigate the university experience. I've been at the university for 35 years in a variety of roles, from housing and residence life to orientation, to starting this office about 6 years ago. And I am actually the proud parent of a Red Hawk alum as well. So I have been in your shoes. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague for her to introduce herself before we get going.
Thanks, Lori. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Kimberly Kaluza. I'm a licensed psychologist and the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services. I've been with Seattle University. This is going on my 15th year and 11 years as the Director of CAPS. Our office is also known as CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services.
Thanks, Kim. We wanted to spend a bit of time with you tonight talking about transition. This is a big transition for your students and for you as family members. This is kind of the focus of this particular orientation webinar. We're not going to be able to answer maybe a lot of nitty-gritty nuts and bolts about some of the programs and services, but to give you some general sense of some of the things that are happening as your student is at this phase of their young life. And you may have other students who you sent off to college. This may be your first, your only, your last. And all of your kids are different, as you know. So let's spend a bit of time. Here are some of the things that we've learned that family members we know are thinking about at this point, right? You probably have a long list yourself, but this is a normal thing for family members and parents and supporters to be wondering about as their student begins this journey, right? Will they do well in classes? Will they find friends? Will they change their major? Frankly, they just may. I think the average is 3 times that students change their major, even if they think they're going into something that they are sure at this point in their lives they're interested in. But there's lots of questions that are happening right now for them and for you. One of the things I want to talk about for sure is kind of this evolving relationship that you are having with your student, right? I mean, they're changing, but your role with them is also changing. So in many ways, as we parent our children up through this age group, we've managed much of their activity and things that they're doing, whether it's making appointments, being a communicator with a teacher, really scheduling their time in many ways, because they need you to do that in this point in their life. As they enter their collegiate life, whether they're commuting from home or living on campus, you're not going to be there all the time. Your student will actually spend more time in self-management than having you be that director or manager of the program. So I'd like to ask you to start thinking of yourself as that coach or mentor who advises from the sidelines, right? You're not front and center directing the show anymore, but hopefully your student is taking on more of that responsibility on their own. And again, college is a different environment than what they've been into right up until this point. This is their job, their main job. Now, many students have other kinds of jobs, employment, while they're a college student, but this is their main focus during this time. It's their education and adapting to an independent living situation. They're coming into their own in their own identity and identities, right? We have many as humans. And this may be a very different environment than what they've been in before in terms of the population of students. We have students from all over the world. We have faculty and staff from all over the world. So it's a window into a larger community. We are not a surrogate home. We want your students to feel at home at Seattle University. But this is going to be a place where they're going to experience growth and challenge in all of the ways that they can, intellectually, emotionally, socially. And given that, there will be struggles for them along the way. I don't think we grow without some of those struggles sometimes. So it won't always be smooth sailings. And as family members and supporters, we know that we'd like to protect our students from all disappointments, but we're not really able to, and certainly not in this environment. So one of the things we hope for your students is that they'll be developing some of that grit and resilience for their success. That's really something. And I think given what we've all been through in the last couple of years with the pandemic and lots of other challenges, that those kinds of skills serve us all well in this environment. And I'd ask you to think about this. I don't know if you went to college, you maybe heard this. Sometimes I heard it. College is the best 4 years of your life. You know, college is a fabulous 4 years in many ways. But if that was the best 4 years of my life in my late teens, early 20s, I'd actually be pretty sad. I want the best to be coming down the pike for me. It is a time of, as I said, of great growth and lots of changes, and it's not always the funnest and best time of their lives. It's a unique and time where they can really stretch and grow in ways that they maybe don't in another 4-year time block. But please just be mindful in terms of setting that expectation. It can really cause students to question, you know, is this for me if they're not having a great time? And they're probably more normal to not always be having a great time.
Great. So let's dig in a little bit more about this developmental phase of life. Some of you may or may not have heard of this term called emerging adulthood, but this was a term that was coined by Dr. Jeffrey Arnett, who's a developmental psychologist, and it refers to this distinct period of development between adolescence and adulthood, specifically the years 18 to 25. Emerging adults often do not see themselves as adolescents anymore, but they also don't see themselves as adults because they have yet to adopt adult roles and responsibilities. So what are some of these adult roles and responsibilities? In research by Dr. Jennifer Tanner, who's a developmental scientist, individuals considered themselves adults when they took on the 5 responsibilities listed there on the slide. I'll read them aloud, and then as I do, think about where your student is in adopting these 5 adult roles and responsibilities. So adults accept responsibility for the consequences of their actions. Adults identify their own personal beliefs and values. They make independent decisions. Adults establish financial independence from parents. I know you're all looking forward to that one. And adults establish an equal relationship with parents. Now, those 5 things are also culturally bound within our larger US culture. So there may be some individual family sorts of differences with some of those. But generally, this is usually accomplished by one's late 20s. So developmentally speaking, 18 is really no longer considered the magic number for adulthood, even though it may be in legal terms. We used to think that the vast majority of brain development occurred in those critical first few years of life. However, in the past couple of decades, we've had a lot of technological advances in neuroimaging, and we now know that the human brain continues to develop right into a person's mid-20s. So let's talk a little bit about the developmental tasks of this phase of life of emerging adulthood. In terms of identity exploration, emerging adults are experimenting with their personal identity within the context typically of separating from family, maybe moving physically apart from family, changing their residence. They're also focusing on making new friends and new connections in order to network for their future careers. And they're pursuing their dreams of who they envision themselves to be in the future, professionally and in adulthood. In terms of worldview, Lori had mentioned that in college, students are exposed to a wide variety of worldviews. You may notice that your emerging adult begins to question the values and beliefs that they may have been raised with or they may have brought with them to college. And they might begin identifying their own values and asserting what they believe. In terms of the domain of love and relationships, We know that emerging adults engage in a variety of romantic and sexual experiences, especially since there is decreased parental monitoring and very little pressure at this time in life to enter into marriage. We know that love tends to become more serious and intimate, emotionally, physically, and sexually, and that relationships often last longer than they did during those teen years. And then in terms of education and work, as Lori mentioned, college students change their majors often more than once, maybe 3 times. That's a totally normative sort of trend. Many people seek internships and or may continue on to get a graduate education. And we know from research that Generation Zers are often looking for meaningful work where they feel like they can make a difference in society and in our world. So just to sum up a bit about emerging adulthood, it's really an in-between time. No longer feeling like an adolescent and not quite feeling like a full-fledged independent adult. Emerging adults are often still quite closely tied to their parents and family. And survey research also shows that many emerging adults still rely heavily on their parents and other family members for trusted guidance. So please know that you still have a very important role to continue playing in your student's life. And this is a really exciting time because very little has been set in stone. So it's a time of great possibility.
Thanks, Kim. I want to talk a bit about kind of what are some fairly common transition issues that will come up for students in the course of the year. And I'm going to do them by quarter since we're on a quarter system, right? Transition is a process. It's not an event. These orientation sessions that they're participating in this summer is not going to make them fully ready for college and good to go. They will find a wave of things along the way that help in that transition. So when they start in the fall, right, it's an exciting time. Hopefully they're excited about starting college, and they'll be testing some of those newfound freedoms quickly. I know my son did when he started. There will probably be homesickness and some loneliness. Again, they're in a new environment where probably they don't know anyone. Most of our students come to Seattle U not knowing any classmates from high school or folks like that. They might not talk about it, but it's pretty common for most students. I know one of the things that is always on students' mind if they're living on campus is the whole roommate situation. You know, how will I get along with my roommate? Who will be my roommate? They're in that process of looking at some of those things now. What will professors be like? What are college classes like? They are different from high school, right? They will be focused on making friends. And it takes a while. Again, they're coming from an environment where maybe they've been in school with some of these folks since kindergarten. Maybe they've moved around a lot, but they still have friends, and they feel like if they don't find their friends right away, again, what am I doing here? Is this the right place for me? That kind of, do I fit in here? It takes time for those bonds to form. Kim talked about relationships a bit. It's not uncommon for there to be breakups of old relationships. Sometimes around Thanksgiving, that tends to be a time, right? Maybe they're home for that holiday and students are have met new folks, or that they're finding that they're not connected to an old relationship. When they get sick for the first time away from home, I know that the emails I get from family members, that is something they're concerned about all the time. They're not used to that. Managing their time, they're in class a lot less than they are in high school in terms of hours, but the expectation for their own work on their classes outside of class is increased. So they really need to work on a schedule and kind of finding the time to do the academic work, as well as the other things they're going to be engaged with. You know, managing finances are an important piece too, right? They're again going to be a bit on their own. There may be new ways of socializing. I think we've all learned to socialize on Zoom and other ways, as well as do our work in business and education. Some of those things may continue here. And again, we're a small, intimate campus, but they might feel like they're a little fish in a bigger pond now. This may be a bigger environment than they've been a part of. When we hit winter in the Northwest, right, that first start of the winter quarter, there's a new set of classes, so they may feel like they've got a fresh start with that new quarter. That's good. They may or may not have been pleased with how they did in their fall quarter grades, and they'll hopefully be making a different plan if it was not how they had hoped it had gone. If you're not from Seattle, it does not rain all the time, I will say, as a non-native Seattleite, but it is gray. And so if they're not used to a grayer environment and the days are shorter, so folks are inside more, although Seattleites learn to do everything outside in the rain, no matter what. And it's not unusual, for folks to get the flu or maybe get a cold in the winter, and that impacts how they're feeling. And they certainly still can be searching for a group of friends. Again, let's talk about how much time it makes to really make solid connections with people, not the, oh my gosh, we just met, so I'm going to hang out with you because none of us know each other. As they've been here longer, hopefully they're making deeper connections. And students will start planning maybe what they might be doing for spring break. Not all of our students go on exotic trips for spring break. Many work, many do service work. So, but students start to talk about that pretty quickly on in the winter quarter. Spring term in Seattle is right after spring break. They again start a new series of classes because we're on that quarter system. And it does start to get nice here, and folks start to get outside and have a bit of spring fever. It might start to feel like the year is a little long. If their friends have gone to a school with semesters, that they will be done about mid-March, we'll be done about mid-June. Now, we started later in September, where their friends maybe started at the end of August. So, but if it starts to feel like a long year. Students will get to choose a new roommate for next year if that's what they want to do. But sometimes that's some anxiety about that. I will tell you, for working in housing and residence life for many, many years and seeing students over the years, sometimes students think, well, I should room with my best friend. Frankly, that is not always the greatest decision. They should room with someone who they can be a roommate with. How do they manage a small space together? How do they respect each other's belongings? Those kinds of things. It's not always the greatest situation for the friends to be roommates. There might be a bit of stress at the end of the year, but they will need to move out of the residence halls if they're living on campus. Even if they're going right back to that same room in the following September, we use our halls in the summer for conferences and summer school and other groups. They might be in the hunt for a summer job. They've been away, even if they've come home for breaks. They've not been home for a couple of months, and there might be some apprehension about returning home for the summer. And they are frequently, of course, sad to leave some of those friends who may live across the globe at this point, who are going to be gone for the summer as well. So things that may happen, these are kind of typical things that happen in the flow of an academic year in terms of transition and what might be on students' minds.
Okay, next we're going to talk a little bit about some college readiness skills, and then I'm going to talk some more about some mental health resources on campus. So in terms of this little list of college readiness skills, this is really, as Lori's been talking about, this transition is for everyone. And a lot of these things maybe you've managed for your students. So this is a nice list to have in terms of reminders of things they'll need to take up for themselves in college. So self-advocacy. At this time, it's helpful to coach your student on how to advocate for themselves, how to call and make their own doctor's appointments, things like that. And in terms of time management, remind your student of structures that worked really well for them in the past. I find that with the freedom of free time, sometimes students aren't quite sure or even know they need to structure their time. And it can be helpful if they've had some reliable routines to remind them what's worked in the past and how they can set up a daily or weekly routine that's going to help them achieve all the things they need to accomplish through the week. And then in terms of responsibility, obviously they'll need to take responsibility for themselves and be their own self-manager. This also means communicating with professors, or if they have a part-time job, communicating with their supervisors when they need to have absences, or if there are other concerns that are coming up, really how to talk with other folks about those things. In terms of tolerating ambiguity and discomfort, there can be a lot of new adjustments and experiences, and all that transition can be anxiety provoking and really uncomfortable. I mean, growth and change are often uncomfortable, even when they're welcome changes. So just encouraging your student to maintain an open, flexible, and adaptable approach, knowing that we all face stressors and challenges, and to be able to sit with and work through some of that discomfort. It's not bad to be uncomfortable. It's actually a sign that there is growth happening. In terms of how to be alone, students will be separated oftentimes from the friends that they grew up with, from their family. And so they do need to learn how to manage themselves, self-soothe and be alone, but also how to utilize those supports. They don't have to let go of everyone. I mean, nowadays we have Zoom, we have FaceTime, we have texting, and hey, the phone calls people too. So we have lots of ways of connecting. So we really encourage students to stay connected to their good support system and to continue to branch out and meet new folks and get involved on campus. And then again, staying open to those who are different from them and learning from others and exchanging ideas and responding to challenges or failures with some resilience, that ability for someone to bounce back from a big stressor or a big disappointment. Some examples that come to mind might be, a student feeling alone, not feeling like they're fitting in and missing home. On the one hand, does that student then stay in their room and just worry about these things alone and begin to withdraw further? Maybe if they're a local student who has family close by, do they start leaving campus on the weekends and staying with family? I don't actually recommend that, especially in the first couple months, because there's many missed opportunities to connect with folks on campus. Or does that student then, I think, which could be some healthy coping to a new environment, start to talk to their resident advisor in the res hall about opportunities to get involved in the Center for Student Involvement, to join a club, or to use UREC to get involved in, which is University Recreation, to get involved with like a fitness class or intramurals where they can do some community building. Another example might be anticipating a poor grade in a class. Sometimes when folks get anxious about things like that, they avoid dealing with it and might even stop going to class. We really want to encourage students to, rather than to avoid, to approach. So to go to the faculty office hours, express what their concerns are, or potentially join a study group with other students where they can realize they're not the only one struggling or alone in some of these things, or use tutoring services through the learning assistance programs. So those are some of the readiness skills we just wanted to highlight for you so you can help your students and coach your student toward these sorts of behaviors as they step onto campus. Next, I want to talk a little bit about some of the mental health resources available to SU students. So in my department, Counseling and Psychological Services, again, often referred to as CAPS, we provide short-term individual counseling. The average number of sessions that a student uses is 5 in an academic year for a course of short-term therapy, but that's not the maximum. That's just the average, both at SU and nationally. There is no cost for our service. Doesn't matter if you have health insurance or not. There are no fees. It is completely confidential, very much like if you were to go to see a psychologist off of campus. The same laws apply, and it's completely voluntary. We don't do mandated treatment. It's just we're here for students when they want and need help. Our clinical staff are licensed mental health care providers in Washington State. So we have licensed psychologists, social workers, marriage family therapists, and licensed counselors. And then for students who may need ongoing or longer term counseling or specialized care, we do keep a database of a network of local providers. And so we can provide referrals to local community providers. There's some more mental health resources that I want to mention to you in the next slide. So CAPS has an online video library that's available 24/7 to students. There are different series. For example, one's called Finding Calm for any students who might be experiencing anxiety. There's another called Coping Through Mindfulness, another on talking to others about your mental health, and one on some weekly self-care. We also have online anonymous mental health screenings so that students can do a self-assessment. There are screenings for anxiety, depression, substance use, eating concerns, and a lot more. And they're all anonymous. And so students can sort of do that self-assessment. And if it indicates there are some concerning symptoms, they can always give us a call. Students also have access to a wellness app. It's called the Sanbello Wellness app. It's evidence-based self-help, again, available on demand. It utilizes cognitive behavioral and mindfulness-based approaches. So for example, they have a series of modules called Braving and Anxiety. And they have guided meditations for, they have so many, I'll just name like a few, some for sleep, some for public speaking, if people have fear of going to the doctor, fear of flying. There's a lot of resources in there that students can use and have in their back pocket, since a lot of students have a smartphone in their back pocket. And SU students have access to this premium membership to Sanbello as a benefit of being an SU student. So they just need to download the Sanbello app and log in with their SU credentials. Our students also have access to a Timely Care app. Timely Care is an independent nationwide telehealth company, and SU has contracted with Timely Care to provide additional medical and mental health telehealth services to our students. You can think of it a lot like an EAP. They provide short-term individualized care, and the students just need to download the Timely Care app, again, and register with their SU credentials, and there's no cost to it at all. A couple features that I'll highlight here related to mental health. They have a Talk Now feature, which is 24/7 access to a counselor for any immediate emotional support needs. And then they also offer scheduled counseling, again, much like an EAP workplace, where it's short-term, I believe up to 12 sessions in an academic year. And those are for scheduled visits. These are really handy if a student has a schedule where it's after hours or on the weekends. Also, because all of the CAPS therapists are licensed to practice only in Washington, Timely Care is a nationwide company. So when a student might be home for a break for an extended period of time, they can use Timely Care with a provider in their state. And then the last thing I want to say about the mental health piece is really planning to set your student up for success. So I think it's really important to think about and discern at this time, how much support do you anticipate your student will need as they transition to SU in the fall? How much support do you think they're going to need in that first year, or even thinking about the next 4 to 5 years? Does your student have an occasional need for additional support, which could be great for short-term therapy? Or do they have an ongoing, already diagnosed condition or health condition that they'll continue to manage for the next 4 to 5 years? So that would be, more in the ballpark of ongoing therapy. So to set your student up for success, I would recommend establishing with a local provider in the Seattle area for long-term care if any of the following apply: that your student is currently undergoing treatment for a previously diagnosed condition, if they have a history of regularly scheduled weekly or monthly therapy, because seeing someone on a super regular basis is a very different feeling than short-term. And then if they have a history of recovery, inpatient or outpatient, or if they have a history of hospitalization and inpatient treatment within the last year, then the best thing to do is really to set them up with an ongoing therapist in the Seattle area who can see them in an unlimited sort of way.
We've been talking a lot about the student transition, but we also want to acknowledge that this is a transition for you as a parent or a family member or supporter, right? Again, we talked about that shifting level of parental responsibility and moving more to that coaching, mentoring role. I remember, Kim talked about that equal relationship with your student, right? You're changing your identity as a parent of an emerging adult. Your family is adjusting to a new dynamic of your student not being there all the time, or again, even if they're commuting from home, to being there maybe different hours. Even your pets, quite frankly, are going to adjust if you have pets to your student being gone. So there's new routines that you will be establishing without your student there all the time. And as excited as you may be for and hopefully you are for this next step for your student, there is a change, and a little bit of emotional piece for yourself about your students growing into this level of adulthood. They may be doing a whole bunch of stuff that they don't share with you, and you might not have as much information about their lives as you used to when they're living under your roof. So there might be some feeling of a void. And again, we're asking you to guide, right, rather than to control. And students will have ups and downs, and you may have ups and downs about how you feel about this transition and how things are going. And how will you stay connected thinking about those things? And again, we are going to constantly emphasize this moving from caretaking to coaching as a good support for your student as they are going through this process. As Kim mentioned, there are things you can do, and you can help. You are an important support system for your students in this process. We are not asking you to let them go, right? You may have heard that people on a college campus are going to ask that. We're going to ask you to let them grow, but not go and be fully separated from them, even though things, you get different kinds of information and things like that. What you do with your student now until they get here, right, and you probably have been doing some of this, is helping them feel confident in their own skills and doing some of these things on their own. So you can talk to them about ways to do that over the summer, kind of develop some of those competencies and readiness skills that Kim addressed. Really encouraging them to take the driver's seat if they need a little push for that. Sometimes they will need a little push to do that. Again, helping them understand that feeling of discomfort is a normal part of transition and growth. Frequently, when I would work with students in orientation, they would think, well, nobody else is talking about being homesick or that this was hard, so it must just be me and something's wrong with me. Most students are feeling it one way or another. They might not feel it in the exact same moment as your student does, but that is a normal thing to feel as they do these kinds of things. One of the things you can do is really learn as much as you can about the university, and you're doing some of that by participating in this or maybe some of the other orientation sessions that we have. We would encourage your student to get involved in something other than their academics. Obviously, that is their primary piece. But we have, I think, close to 150 clubs and organizations on campus, maybe things they've been involved with in the past, maybe something they want to try new, that they've not done before. This is a great time to do it. Many of our students have some sort of a part-time job, whether it's on campus or not. And that helps them with kind of that time management as well. If they've got a shift of work that they've got to do for a few hours, and they can obviously around their classes, that can help them. They will need you to listen quite a bit. And then I know what I had to do was fight that urge to fix it, right? To just kind of ask them to problem solve and help them strategize on that. Letting them make those mistakes is a really important thing. Kim talked about the many ways we can stay connected, that reaching out, you will reach out. They don't always respond right away. Let's hope they're not going to respond if they are in a class or something like that. But again, you know your student better than we do. So if you continue to reach out and you are not getting anything from them or you're concerned, please reach out to us and we'll see what we might be able to do there. And I would ask you to be ready for what I call the dump phone call or text, okay? You're that safe space. You are the unconditional love and support for your students. So if they are struggling, maybe you've just texted them or you called them and they got out of a class and they got maybe their first college paperback and it didn't go as well as they thought. They had a lot of feedback from the faculty member, or they had a disagreement with their roommate or a friend. And so you catch them in a moment of stress. They give that to you. They tell, I don't know, I don't like this class, I don't like my roommate, it rains too much in Seattle, whatever they're feeling in the moment. you get it all, and then they hit that send button on the text or they hang up the phone, they're fine now. 9 times out of 10, they are fine. And they've moved on. They're going to get pizza with their friends. And you're sitting there thinking, is my student okay? What should I do? Do I get on a plane? Please, really, you don't usually need to get on a plane to come. But that's again, because you are that safe space for them, that unconditional love spot. And then again, if you are really concerned and you get a lot of stressful calls, please reach out to us. But mostly they are going to be just fine after they've kind of given you that gift of, they don't call it a gift, but it is a gift because it is their way of showing that they know that you are there for them. One of the other things you can do over the course of the summer as well is to have what we would call 10 5-minute conversations. This is not a sit down with this laundry list. And by the way, we are recording this and we will make it available on the orientation website, so you don't have to take all of these notes down. But topics to talk about over the course of the summer, not all at once. You don't have to have a lengthy conversation about all of them. These are going to be listed in alphabetical order, not necessarily order of importance. I think that's something for you to think about with your student. What's the most important one, right? But what are they hoping to get out of their college experience? Certainly, talking about drugs and alcohol, your expectations, you have given them a set of values that are deeply ingrained in them, whether you think they are all the time or not. How will they, what kinds of decisions will they make when they're confronted with these choices and some peer pressure? Not all college students drink. That is a myth. Not all college students drink. What are your expectations around budgets and money? Will they work? How will they utilize those resources? What do they need to budget for besides? There are, of course, expenses besides tuition, room and board, kinds of things. What are your expectations around communication? How often do you want to hear from them? How do you want to hear from them? Those kinds of things. What works for you and your student? Really encouraging some of those healthy choices. Some of these things that they can establish now will serve them well. Sleep is incredibly important for college. It's for college students, for all of us, of course. But really, college students need to sleep and not pull an all-nighter most times. That doesn't help them. That kind of, how are they going to fit in some exercise? We have a rec center that's available to them. How are they going to just take care of their body? How do they make some good choices about food when they're at a dining facility where, should they choose to, they could really do chicken strips and fries every meal, which we certainly hope they are not. We have lots of vegetables and a salad bar and healthy food. So we hope they are doing that kind of thing. Again, the involvement piece. What might they want to be involved with? Helping them kind of hone in on a few things, 2 or 3, as opposed to trying to sign up for 10 different clubs. They can't manage 10 clubs in their academics. So what would be helpful for them in terms of an outlet for things to be involved with? Sex and relationships. Again, you've set some expectations around values related to that. We are in the city. How are they going to be in an urban environment? The sitting in with your head down, texting on your phone and maybe some earbuds in with your hood on is not the greatest way to walk around in a city. Seattle is safe, but you have to be smart about how you go about it. We will also have, programs that our public safety and our halls do with students when they get here about some of those things. Again, the studying habits. Maybe they've had some things that have really worked for them well in high school. They may work again, but they may need to change some of those. We have, as Kim mentioned, a learning assistance programs department that has everything from tutoring and note-taking workshops to all sorts of good things to help students with their academic pursuits. And I think students sometimes think, well, I only use the learning assistance programs if I'm struggling. The best students use those programs to become better students. So we encourage all students to take advantage of those, not just when they're struggling, and certainly before they are. And again, will they be working as part of their way to to maybe help finance their education or to have their spending money. How often, how many hours will they be working? If your student has an on-campus work study position, it will say that they can work up to 20 hours a week. Frankly, in my experience, particularly with first-year students, I would shoot for between 10 and 15 while they establish their academics and get settled in. 20 is quite a bit in that first year. Again, short conversations, not all at once. Maybe you're in the car driving someplace. Maybe you're picking up dishes and cleaning up after dinner. You don't have to be locked in eye to eye. You can maybe be standing side by side to do some of these things, just broaching these topics. Again, we have that technology, right? And I asked you to just think about these things. We are able to be in touch way more than when I was a student and there was a payphone down the hall and we all sat outside it and maybe got on there for a few minutes. But because of the technology, we can be in constant contact. Is that the best thing for your student, right? And figuring out what's that challenge of being connected to your student and close while giving them that space to grow and mature. Again, thinking about who's doing the outreach. Is it you? Is it your student, right? Many of your students are probably not on Facebook anymore, but if they are, should you be Facebook friends with them? Do you follow them on Instagram or Twitter? Should you be doing those things? Is that the most helpful thing for you and for them? And Kim mentioned a phone call. That feels like an old-fashioned thing right now, but actually, the other thing would be if you actually send them a care package, if they're living on campus. Every student has a mailbox on campus in the lobby of that residence hall, so they have to check it. But if you send, a note or a care package with something they love, they'll get a little slip in their mailbox or an email that says, "Come get it." And they will be well loved by their floor mates if there are cookies or something, some sort of a treat in there. Some of the resources that we have on campus. Again, this office is here for you, and I'll talk a bit more about it in a bit. But Kim, if you want to talk about some of those other pieces as well.
Sure. Just a little bit about the Student Health Center. It's our primary medical care clinic on campus for our SU students. The cost for a visit is a $5 administrative fee, and there may be some additional lab costs, but it's just $5, and it does not matter if you have health insurance or not. And then I talked to you a bit about CAPS. Again, it's short-term, no-cost individual psychotherapy. Lori had mentioned, about the transition and helping your student to get involved. There may be times where actually you might have a question now as you're preparing for your student to launch, or if your student has arrived in fall and it's been like 6 weeks and they're calling you every week and they're quite miserable. You might be more concerned about depression or something more serious going on. So I do want all of you to know that if you have questions specific to your student's unique healthcare needs or a circumstance that's bubbling up, you can call CAPS to consult with one of our licensed mental health care providers. And that's just a service we have for anyone who's concerned about the well-being and safety of an SU student. And then I mentioned Timely Care, and I'm happy to put into the chat a link to that so you can learn more about that app and all of the services it offers, because it also offers some medical care, telehealth visits, nutritional counseling, health coaching for other things. Some students use the health coaching around sleep, which Lori mentioned is very important and sometimes challenging with all the stress and responsibilities that students have. And then our wellness and health promotion department does a lot of programming for students around de-stressing. And they have a group of student leaders called the Health and Wellness Crew who do some peer coaching around health. And so that would be a great department to check out as well.
Great. We talked a bit about, oops, sorry, got too many screens going here. Your students have hopefully already met some of the orientation leaders, the student leaders and the orientation staff if you went to the launch. All the students will have that orientation leader or somebody to connect with. The residence halls have student staff. They have full-time professional area coordinators who live in residence with the student. There are staff in our link communities for our commuting students. They will have an academic advisor. If they are first generation student, the Outreach Center does some additional programming with first generation. Obviously, they'll have their faculty. The Center for Student Involvement is our student activities area. Again, those clubs and organizations or just programming for students. And we have a campus ministry department that works with students of all faiths or no faith in terms of just providing that opportunity for spiritual growth in some way. Okay, so again, a little more from this office. I am here as a resource for you. I will send an email newsletter about once a month that will kind of give you a sense of what's upcoming, like is it time for academic advising before the next quarter's scheduling? When is roommate selection or room selection for next year? Little things like that, maybe some information about the various resources that we have. We will do a webinar a quarter usually, again, where we go a little more in depth on some of the resources on campus. Our website has lots of information there. If you are a Facebooker and want to be a part of a Facebook group for parents and families, we have that where you can kind of be back and forth with some other families, and some of the departments on campus answer questions on there as well. There's this dedicated parents' email address that you have and a phone number that come to me. So if you have questions, if I can't answer it, I will help you get to the people who can, so that you're not in a wild goose chase for not knowing what's happening on campus. And we will invite you back to campus in the fall for our family weekend program if you're so interested. I'll send invitations in early to mid-September. This is a chance for you to come back and see your students settled in a bed and to participate in some activities with them. And you can pick and choose what part of the weekend you want to go to. Nothing is required of it, or you can do what some families do, which is they say, we're not going to sign up for anything on campus, but it's family weekend, so we're using this as an excuse to come and visit our student, right? So because you probably by this point have not seen them in about a month or so. So we welcome you to come in whatever way makes sense for you and your student. Just some things to continue to remember, right? Your student has one foot in each world, and you do too as they're going through this transition. So please be kind and patient with yourself as well as them. Not all of us have a swimmingly fine relationship with our children along the way, so maybe your relationship will improve as they develop this new level of independence. And we can't stress enough that you are still so important to them, whether they acknowledge it or not. They listen to what you say, and you are a huge support. So please give yourself credit. You have prepared them for this journey. Okay. Want to make sure you know there's more orientation information available to you. If you have questions, there are more sessions that you're welcome to. You can see them on that orientation webpage. They have a dedicated email address as well, and that phone number for them. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and try to share another so you can see if I can get it to come up here. Hang on, I'm going to try. My computer's
There it is.
Is it there? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. You can see if you scroll through here, all of the other sessions happening this week for students and some for you. So again, please have your student be checking that. It's probably not a bad idea for you to remind your student maybe weekly about have they checked in with their Seattle U email to see what's happening. And do they know what deadlines are coming up, right? And we know that there are a number of things that they'll have to do about being involved in selecting their roommate if they choose to do that. If they don't find somebody in the roommate search process, the housing folks will pair them with someone, so they are not stuck on their own there. And I see that Colin behind the scenes is putting lots of the links in the chat. So again, we had a couple of questions we want to answer live too before we go. So in terms of how long should I stay? A parent is asking, how long should I stay when they move their students in? Most families will just be there that opening day, that September 17th. And really we'll have a few things for you as families and supporters on that day. And then the students will be pretty heavily involved in their own orientation experience. So, and we want them to do that because this is a time where we're really focused on their transition. So there's not a need for family members to stay beyond that. They'll have a couple of days. So, if they've forgotten something and they need to buy something, there's time for them to do some of that. Obviously, the campus store will be open and they can get their books and things like that. But usually just that first day or when our families are there, and then they depart and the students participate fully in the rest of the fall welcome before classes begin. And another question related to will you get any information from us? You will get those newsletters, and sometimes you'll get some other communications if they happen. I know certainly through COVID, we sent many communications to family members that we typically would not be sending. But if students got a major email from a department on campus, we would also send it off to family members. You don't get everything they get, but if it's a critical thing, they will. We will send it to you as well. Anything else that people have for questions? If you type them in the Q&A, we can try to answer. We've got just a minute or two left.
Lori, oh, did you? Yeah, I think you got them.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to add with Family Weekend, I think the favorite thing that students enjoy and what you could anticipate is they may have a list that they'd like to go shopping with. And going out off campus for dinner with the family is often nice for them.
Those are certainly highlights of the weekend. We have so many restaurants around campus, some of which probably aren't really super accessible on a student budget. And it's not uncommon to see lots of trips from a Target or a Costco or something else rolling into the halls on Family Weekend. Great. All right. Well, we appreciate your spending this time with us today, and we are excited to have you as members of our Red Hawk family as well. Again, please, if you have questions related to orientation over the summer, reach out, or if you want to just send something to parents@seattleu.edu, we will try to answer it for you, and we hope we get to meet you in the fall when you arrive with your student. Enjoy your summers with your students. Take care, everyone.
Congratulations, and give yourselves a pat on the back. Well done, family members. Thanks all.